The new automobile was earned by your brother. In fact, he comes. As he gave me the shocks, Dad said. I just grinned and said, that's cool. He can then pay your bills for this month. When I removed my name from their utilities the next day, I saw the panic start. Reddit, hello. It was always clear to me as a youngster that my brother was the best child. When things went tough, I was the one who remained at home, took over, paid the bills when my parents couldn't, helped mend broken pipes, purchased food, and generally kept things running smoothly. In contrast, my brother visited twice a year. Once at Christmas to collect whatever presents and accolades he could before vanishing back into his own life, and once on Thanksgiving, if we were fortunate. In spite of everything, my parents, particularly my father, never shied away from reminding me of my brother's greater worth. It seems that calm, steady assistance was much more valuable than visits full of hollow promises and showy embraces. It reached a breaking point last week. When my dad summoned me outside, I had just returned from a hard shift, my back hurting and my wallet feeling empty. The brand new vehicle in the driveway was a great improvement over my brother's old, dilapidated sedan. Dad said he needed assistance fixing shocks on their old vehicle and gave me a couple of crates full of auto supplies. Not even a greeting was given to me. My brother deserved the new car because at least he visited, he stated almost casually as he gave me the boxes. Like it didn't matter how much time, money, and effort I put into helping them since it wasn't ostentatious enough to show off around the holidays. I took in the nonchalant brutality of his comments as I looked at him for a moment. Then I grinned. It's the type of grin you offer someone when you've already made a choice that they aren't even aware is coming, not a forced or courteous one. I answered, cool, with a shrug. He can then settle your debts for this month. Perhaps sensing that things was going to change a little too late, Dad blinked at me but remained silent. As if nothing had occurred, he just turned and went back inside, expecting me to work on the vehicle like the lovely daughter I was meant to be. I was at my computer that night, looking through all of the utility accounts associated with my name, while they sat comfortably inside watching TV, undoubtedly boasting to anybody who would listen about the new automobile. Gas, electricity, water, and the internet are all deducted from my bank account and are all linked to my credit. Because a few years earlier, when things were hard, they had sought for assistance and said it would only be temporary. Naturally, since I made it simple, temporary had become endless. However, it is no longer the case. I wasn't merely stopping payments that evening. I was severing the link that bound me to their demands. I called them the next morning, before they had even woken up, retrieved my name and payment information from each account, put up disconnection notifications as needed, and stopped autopay. It was like cutting out 1,000 small, invisible strands that had been securing me for years with a pair of scissors. Without turning around, I packed a suitcase, grabbed my laptop and critical papers, and left the house. I didn't create a scene or slam the door. Like a storm retreating from the coast, leaving debris in its behind, I just walked away, silent and serene. Silence like that spoke louder than any yelling bout ever could. The panic had begun by midday. After a few missed calls, my mother started sending panicked SMS. What caused the internet to go down? Was the water turned off, which is why the water pressure was low? Was there anything I knew about this? Now they wanted my assistance. In around 5 minutes, my dad shifted from being confused to furious, as was to be expected. His most recent text message simply said, "You better fix this." I placed my phone on quiet, read it, and grinned once again. Red in the face, I could practically see him pacing the living room while gripping his priceless phone as if yelling commands into it would somehow bring me back. My brother had been engaged by the evening. It seems that when Dad phoned him, he wanted him to jump right in and make things right as I used to. My brother, on the other hand, is all about looks. Unless there was a picture opportunity, he was not going to spend his own money to pay someone else's expenses. Consequently, he bailed rather than stepping up. "I'm too busy," he said. Next week, he could be able to assist. And he didn't guarantee anything even then. They were astonished, even astonished. They had never imagined that when things turned tough, their golden kid would abandon them. At the meanwhile, I was enjoying coffee while relaxing at my friend's place and felt more liberated than I had in a long time. Being the fallback option is over. No more bearing the burden of a disrespectful family. No longer being the unseen safety net they relied upon. I ought to have felt bad. A little part of me awakened, the bit that had spent years learning to prioritize their demands above my own. However, the overpowering sense of calm I experienced overshadowed everything. It was a composition I hadn't tasted in a very long time. I had a gut feeling that they would have drained me completely if I had remained even one more day. I was sleeping on the sofa later that night when I thought about all the years I had given up for them. I had accepted jobs to help them pay off their debts. Because there was always another issue at home, I had to cancel my travels. My parents made me feel bad for living a life outside from their troubles, which caused my friendships to deteriorate. I came to the realization that my whole life had been centered on fixing flaws in a ship that they were too indolent to address on their own. The debts weren't the only thing at stake. It was about all of the energy they had unrepentantly taken. I awoke the next morning to a fresh barrage of texts. My mom wasn't the only one who spoke this time. My aunt, uncle, and even a few family acquaintances had also spoken out. My parents had apparently been busy making me the bad guy. The unappreciative daughter who had deserted her elderly parents when they were in need. They attempted to humiliate me into returning, guilt-tripped, and pleaded. Once upon a time, it would have succeeded. But now that I've read those passages, I only feel an empty melancholy. That they were unable to get beyond their own sense of entitlement and see that I had been bleeding for them for years made me sad. I completed something I had been considering for months that afternoon when I went to the neighborhood notary public's office. Removing my name from their list of emergency contacts, terminating my co-signer responsibilities, and even closing the joint account they pleaded with me to create in order to facilitate bill payment. For the life they had shackled me to, each paper I signed seemed like a little, last burial. I wasn't just walking away. I was throwing the key into the deepest water I could locate, locking the door, and shutting it. My mother sent me one more message as darkness fell. It wasn't upset. It was a dire situation. All it said was, "Come home, please. We're unsure about what to do. You, not your brother, are what we need. You." I gazed at the screen for a while, feeling the burden of all those years. However, I immediately put the phone face down on the table since, for once, I wasn't in charge of their emergency. I wasn't going to intervene and save them the repercussions of their own decisions for once. And I was convinced of one thing as I sat there, experiencing the complete, weighty solitude of a life that was at last mine. This was just the start. The utilities cutting off was seen negatively by them. They didn't know what was going to happen. The days that followed were oddly silent. It seemed as if my parents had gone radio quiet after the first rush of frantic communications and finger-pointing. I was familiar enough with them to know what it meant. They were holed up, strategizing, stewing, and attempting to find out how to turn the tide back in their favor. For a split second, I thought they could arrive at my friend's flat and demand explanations or spout guilt. However, they didn't. They felt, maybe for the first time, that I was no longer amenable to the old tricks. In the meanwhile, I had a better life than I could have ever dreamed of without them burdening me. I paid my own expenses and had money left over. For once, I had time to consider what I wanted. I began working out again, applied for a better job, and even got in touch with some old friends I had lost touch with because I was so preoccupied saving the family. It seemed like I was recovering a piece of myself that had been robbed throughout the years with each little act of freedom. It wasn't until I was at last free that I realized how much of who I was had been centered on fixing them. However, I discovered that independence has its own set of difficulties. A week or so after I left, I received a call one evening from an unidentified number. I replied it against my better judgment. It was my father. His voice sounded brittle and strained, as if pride and duct tape were keeping him together. He informed me that the water was going to be permanently cut off, that they were behind on their payments, that the internet was still down, and that the auto insurance had expired since they had depended on me to pay it for so long. I wasn't asked to return. He insisted on it as if nothing had changed and I was still obligated to do it. I listened in silence, feeling oddly removed, as if I were watching a play instead of experiencing it. After he finished his tirade, I inhaled deeply and posed a straightforward question to him. I questioned him about his belief that I owed them anything. A lengthy pause ensued. I could really hear his mind racing, trying to think of a response that didn't seem entitled or self-centered. He murmured something about how families keep together, how kids respect their parents, and how I should be thankful for the roof they gave me as a youngster. After letting him finish, I patiently explained that being grateful did not equate to being a slave. That having a roof over my head as a kid wasn't a present. It was the very least that a parent could give their kid. That respecting my family did not require me to give up my life for others who saw me as nothing more than a living, breathing financial account. I hung up before he could protest. Something changed forever after that call. They understood that I would no longer run. No more rescues at night. No more mending the mess caused by their poor choices. No more giving up my future, money, or emotional well-being to support a family that never really appreciated me. My aunt informed me via mail a few days later that my parents had at last asked for assistance. From a social service organization that may really help them, not from me. She seemed almost resentful about it, as if admitting they required outside assistance was a huge embarrassment. Hearing that brought me comfort, but no pleasure. Even if it meant reaching the bottom of the abyss, they were finally being made to stand on their own 2 feet. My brother, the so-called golden kid, remained distant in the meanwhile. As it turned out, showing up for a few Christmas selfies was one thing, but staying there when the power was being shut off and the credit cards were maxed out was quite another. He made it plain that he would not pay their expenses or change his plans in order to save them. I almost felt sorry for him, in a weird sense. The pedestal had been handed to him, but not the tools. When the moment came, he just couldn't since he had never been asked to stand up. My parents were now suffering the price for living in a fiction about him that they had created. Months went by. I got my own little apartment and furnished it the way I wanted, free from constant criticism that I was frivolous or squandering money. I prepared my own food, paid my own bills, and purchased used furnishings. Though small, it belonged to me. It was also tranquil, which is more significant. No doors being slammed, no passive-aggressive remarks made over dinner, and no feeling of duty binding me to a life I never chose. I was able to breathe deeply for the first time in years without feeling as if expectations and guilt were drowning me. I bumped into an old family buddy at the supermarket store one day. As if she had seen a ghost, she gazed at me. She questioned if it was accurate to say that I had left my parents behind and that they were having difficulties without me. No, I didn't abandon anyone, I responded, meeting her gaze directly. I just stopped allowing them to leave me. She was unsure of how to react to it. I stood there with a weird sensation of calm while she said something and left. Then I understood that there will always be viewpoints in the world. People would spread rumors, pass judgment, and fabricate stories, but ultimately, they hadn't experienced my life. They had no right to tell me how I should feel about laying it down since they hadn't borne the same burden as me. Ultimately, I didn't go away to punish my parents. It had nothing to do with retaliation or resentment. It was a matter of survival. It had to do with deciding to live my own life rather than getting caught up in a never-ending loop of making sacrifices for others who saw my generosity as weakness. It was about realizing for the first time that love devoid of respect is very deceptive. I learned that lesson much too late, but once I did, there was no turning back. 6 months later, my parents sent me their last text message. It wasn't long. "We hope you are well," it stated. "You are missed." There was just a silent recognition that the relationship had permanently changed. No demands, no guilt, no pleading. I didn't respond because I loved myself too much to open a door that went back into the dark, not because I detested them. Certain things should never be broken again once they have been mended. And I came to a profound realization that night as I sipped a cup of tea in total quiet in my little apartment, with lights sparkling outside the window. I had not lost any relatives. I had discovered who I was. And it was more valuable than everything else, so I left.